Hi there ladies and gents, welcome back to another Payday 2 build video. As promised, today I'm going to be catering to the console players out there, bringing you a build that will excel when used with a controller and without utilising any of the PC exclusive content. That doesn't mean this build isn't also an excellent build for PC, undoubtedly being one down death sentence viable. In fact, there's not much I'd change if I were to port it over to PC, so you console players don't need to feel left behind by power creep in any way. It also uses two non-DLC weapons and a non-DLC perk deck, meaning all you need is the gauge shotgun pack for explosive rounds and you'll have the key elements ready to go. I'm still going to release a complete best free-to-play build, but in the meantime a variant of this one will definitely tide you over. Anyway, let's get into it. So as ever, starting with our primary weapon, it's the one, the only, the IZHMA 12 gauge. Yeah, not a big surprise here, this weapon is a monster in the right hands. I also think auto shotguns in general translate really nicely to console. The way shotgun pellet spread and damage functions, as well as the fire rate, really lends itself to the less twitchy and more imprecise shooting that controllers force you into. Don't get me wrong, some of you guys are probably just as good on the sticks as many mouse and keyboard players, but at least for me, who's a little out of practice on controller, the IZHMA was just the crutch I needed. I modify it for a hybrid concealment setup. Starting with the triple AUG buckshot for ammunition type, we go with the short barrel, the shark teeth nozzle, concealment boost, auto fire customization, the hollow handle, compact laser module, AK rubber grip, the Big Brother magazine, basic iron sights, so no scope, and finally the skeletal stock. Wow, the IZHMA is probably the most customizable weapon in the game. Looking at the overall stats, this leaves us with a sizable chunk of stability at 76, nice low accuracy, beneficial for widening shotgun spread, and concealment at 22. We'll get onto its overall damage and ammo efficiency once we've discussed skills, as this base value of 66 is a little misleading. Just trust me, the IZHMA is a really fun and powerful weapon. In fact, the only reason that it seems some players have been curbing their use of this gun is because it's too damn strong and consistent. For our secondary, it's everyone's favourite, the Judge shotgun. As you can already tell, we're going to be picking up shotgun skills, so why not emphasise that with a shotgun secondary? The Judge is quite simply the most versatile weapon in the game. Great for stealth, loud, as a damaging weapon, as a utility weapon, or just to hit low detection risk for some more specific builds. Here we're using it for a combination of these reasons, equipping it with the high explosive rounds, concealment boost, compact laser module, and that's it. Simple and super concealable. This thing has a great deal of DPS potential, 30 points of concealment, plus it has the additional utility of explosive rounds equipped. This means shields, bulldozer faceplates, and large groups of enemies will be a cinch for the Judge to deal with. I've really been fond of sticking to grenade launcher secondaries lately, but when it comes down to needing something for more concealment heavy builds, there really is no better option than the Judge. If you don't have the gauge shotgun pack, don't fear, the Judge is still an excellent choice, but you're going to be using it as more of a secondary cop killing weapon instead of reloading the IZHMA. Sadly, dozers and shields will be more of an issue, but you will retain the added benefit of being able to headshot, meaning your damage per second will likely actually be higher. For our perk deck of choice, we go with Stoic. The catalyst to any good Payday 2 build is its perk deck, and I had my misgivings putting this one on a console build because of the mechanical requirements. But I found it works just as well as on PC with a little practice. Stoic's probably the best overall perk deck in the game if we're talking about individual survivability. The problem is it's dependent on a good understanding of how it works and great timing of your hip flask usages. I'm sure most of you know by now, but I will quickly run over how it works as it can be quite confusing at first. If you know all this already, skip to the timestamp on screen and in the description for more build info. Basically, Stoic reduces all incoming damage by 75%, meaning you only take a quarter of the damage you normally would, at least initially. You see, those extra 3/4 don't just disappear. Instead, you take that damage as damage over time, spread out over 12 seconds. This doesn't sound great as you'll still be dying, just at a delayed rate. This is where the complexity comes in. If you can avoid further damage for 4 seconds, that stored damage will disappear, meaning conceptually, if you take a single instance of damage and receive no additional damage for 4 seconds, in total, that shot will have only done 50% of its normal damage. Pretty cool. But there's even more. Later in the perk deck, we get the ability to heal for 50% of that remaining damage, meaning most of the upfront damage will be completely negated. So, are we really taking any damage at all? Well, in theory, we will die eventually at this rate, but that's where the hip flask comes in. What I haven't mentioned is that we don't always have to wait out those 4 seconds. Stoic replaces are throwable with the Stoic hip flask, which when consumed will immediately negate the damage over time effect and apply the 50% heal based on what that dot was going to do to you, so often you can quite literally heal using enemy damage. To make this even better, it has a fairly low 10-second cooldown, which can be brought down even further by securing kills when it's on cooldown at an increased rate when your health is low. The synergy in this perk deck is incredible, and although I prefer Anarchist as I think it's a less passive playstyle, I have to admit it's hard to argue Stoic isn't objectively stronger when playing solo. All of these positives come at the debatable cost of having your armor converted into health at a point-to-point ratio, meaning you only have one resource to manage, simplifying the use of the perk deck. The only real downside is that you can't use the armor health gate mechanic, meaning all damage will be felt in full as health point damage, admittedly at the Stoic reduced rate. I'd say a pretty worthwhile trade for virtual immortality if you're good with the deck. That was more of a mouthful than I expected, but I think having a thorough understanding of Stoic is more important than most other perk decks, which pretty much operate themselves. Armor choice is also a really important factor in Stoic builds, as obviously the more armor you have, the more health you'll have to play with. We also have to keep concealment in mind for this build, so I think a sweet spot is around the ballistic vest or heavy ballistic vest point. I've done the maths on this, and if you're playing solo with an AI character bringing Reinforcer, go with the ballistic vest. It will let you move faster and is right in the sweet spot for taking up to 9 shots from heavy swats on death sentence. If you're playing online, use the heavy ballistic, as it will let you take 1 more shot from 225 damage enemies for just 3 points of lost crit, or a lost attachment of your choice on the IZHMA. There's also elements of preference in this one, so honestly try both and see how they feel. For equipment, we go first aid kits, and melee is the buzzer if you have it, if not, the electric brass knuckles will do the job. A final build segment I do want to cover is the Team AI setup. If you haven't seen it already, I made a full video detailing the best AI setups for different builds and found out which weapon is probably the best for them overall. For this one, I actually go with 2 R93s and a Brenner. I find the range and taser destroying nature of the R93 to be really helpful, and the Brenner is the best of the LMGs, so it's just very consistent overall. The crew abilities are quick, piercing, and inspiring, and the boosts are accelerator, invigorator, and reinforcer. Remember, reinforcer can be pretty important in this build. Now onto the skills, starting with Mastermind. I saw people unimpressed by my lack of Inspire or Jokers on the last build. Well, worry not, they're all here. We pick up Combat Medic, Quick Fix Aced, Uppers Aced, and Inspire Aced. In Controller we get Forced Friendship and Joker, as well as Confidant, Partners in Crime, and Hostage Taker all aced. Finally, we put a spare point in Stable Shot. In the Medic tree, Quick Fix allows us to take even less damage per shot pretty much throughout a heist, and Uppers Aced comes with an amazing secondary effect, allowing us to full heal whenever we would go down, assuming we're within 5 meters of a first aid kit. Of course, Inspire is Inspire, not as great when playing solo, but pretty much essential when playing online. The real key skill in Controller is the 30% health increase provided by Partners in Crime's Aced effect. This will increase our ballistic vest setup from 394 with Reinforcer active to 512, a sizable leap. Hostage Taker is a fairly underrated skill as well and pairs nicely with Stoic, as health is our only resource, providing improved survivability throughout the heist. In Enforcer, we look at Shotgunner getting Underdog, Shotgun Impact, acing Shotgun CQB and Close By, and finally the always brilliant Overkill skill. In the tank tree, we want Iron Man Basic as cheaply as possible, so we go Resilience, Transporter, and Die Hard, all aced before putting a single point in Iron Man. The shotgun skills are self-explanatory, buffing both our primary and secondary, but Close By in particular makes a big difference to how often you need to reload. Obviously, Overkill has always been one of the best skills in the game, skyrocketing our IZHMA's damage potential. Shotgun Impact is not really a necessity, but I have seen some builds which choose to ace it out. For me, we're going to get enough damage multipliers anyway, so there's no need to go beyond the basic version. We're obviously using ballistic type vests, so Die Hard works nicely, and although we don't use armor directly, it does influence our health pool, so Iron Man is still very useful. Next up, we don't bother with Technician, so on to Ghost. Duck and Cover as well as Parkour are pretty standard pickups in all of my builds, and over in Silent Killer we get Second Wind, Optical Illusions, and Low Blow aced for that critical damage. I think picking up in a pockets aced is a fallacy, as it costs the same amount of points as acing Low Blow, minus the extra concealment wiggle room that Low Blow offers, letting you modify your IZHMA more aggressively as I do here. However, if you don't have the DLCs required to make the IZHMA as concealable as I did, you're going to need to switch some points into Inner Pockets aced just to get to that 25 threshold. If I were you, I'd probably take them from Hostage Taker aced. Finally, this is a 1 down build, so we need 9 lives aced in the Fugitive section. A sad necessity really. I would have liked to pick up Swan Song, it's great with the damage potential of shotguns and pairs really well with Inspire, but I just don't have enough skill points for that. Maybe you can consider where to drop points if you want to pick up this amazing skill. To conclude, let's quickly touch on some notes I made for when using this build. First of all, how much damage are we really going to be outputting? Well, 30 points of crit gives a 30% chance for your shot to automatically apply headshot damage. This stacks with an actual headshot, meaning at best when hitting a cloaker with a ×9 multiplier crit in the head, we will be dealing over 9,000 damage. Not bad for a weapon with a 333 round per minute fire rate. The IZHMA's ammo pickup at 5.92, magazine capacity with skills at 26, and reload speed at 2.6 is also pretty much second to none. This weapon is fairly undisputed as far as power goes, so use and abuse it to your heart's content. If I'm able to get heist done on DSOD with my rusty controller skills, I'm sure you guys will find it easy. Another thing to keep in mind is that the judge has reduced ammo pickup due to the HE rounds, so use it sparingly against the enemy types that explosives really excel against, particularly shields and SWAT turrets. Movement speed wise, you're going to be somewhere in the middle. Don't expect to be zipping around like a full suit dodge build, but any immobility you will experience is worth it when with the touch of a single button all incoming damage is wiped off. Speaking of that button, probably the hardest thing about this setup is getting used to pressing left on the D-pad or 3 on keyboards while still staying mobile and getting to cover. I actually recommend sliding your right hand across to the D-pad so that you can keep your thumb on the left control stick and maintain some momentum while taking a sip and healing up. This technique definitely improved my gameplay. Keeping a closer eye on the flash recharge rate also made a huge difference, always making sure it was ready to go before moving for objectives. From a combat point of view, when playing on PC, unloading from the hip is both easier and desirable, as you'll get the increased fire rate from close by. But with a controller, I found myself ADSing a lot more, often to take some advantage of the aim assist this provides. This really may just be a me problem, as I've very much stepped out of my Payday comfort zone here, returning to a controller after about 4 years of not touching the console version, so your mileage may vary. Finally, in terms of updates to this build, it really does seem like the current 1.5 console update is what we're going to be dealing with, at least for the foreseeable future. I know how much this annoys many of you, and trust me, I don't like it either, and I get the impression Overkill regrets it massively as well. As such, I see this staying as my ultimate console build, at least until we get an additional balance patch, assuming that day comes. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Big shout out to you console players, you make up a massive portion of the community, and while the update schedule may have forgotten about you, I certainly have not. If you have any questions or suggestions for this build, I'll be down in the comments as always for discussion. I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say. Stay tuned on the channel, more builds like this coming your way, as well as episode 3 of the story. See you all very soon.